Agis. The fable of Ixion, who, embracing a cloud, instead of Juno, begot the centaurs, has been ingenuously enough supposed to have been invented to represent to us ambitious men whose minds, dotting on glory, which is a mere image of virtue, produce nothing that is genuine or uniform, but only as might be expected of such a conjunction, misshapen and unnatural actions, running after their emulations and passions, and carried away by the impulses of the moment. And they may say with the herdsman in the tragedy of Sophocles, "We follow thee, though born the rightful lords, and they command us, though they speak no words." For this is indeed the true condition of men in public life, who, to gain the vain title of being the people's leaders and governors, are content to make themselves the slaves and followers of all the people's humors and caprices. For as the lookout men at the ship's prow, though they see what is ahead before the men at the helm, yet constantly look back to the pilots there and obey the orders they give, so these men, steered, as I may say, by popular applause, though they bear the name of governors, are in reality the mere underlings of the multitude. Yeah, people in government should really do better than just mere popularity. The man who is completely wise and virtuous has no need at all of glory, except so far as it disposes and eases his way to action by the greater trust that it procures him. A young man, I grant, may be permitted, while yet eager for distinction, to pride himself a little in his good deeds, such as Theophrastus says, his virtues, which are yet tender, as it were, in the blade, cherished and supported by praises, grow stronger, and take the deeper root. But when this passion is exorbitant, it is dangerous in all men, and in those who govern a commonwealth utterly destructive, for in the possession of large power and authority it transports men to a degree of madness, so that now they no more think what is good and glorious, but will have those actions only esteemed good that are glorious, as Phocion therefore answered King Antipater, who sought his approbation of some unworthy action, "I cannot be your flatterer and your friend." So these men should answer the people, "I cannot govern and obey you." For it might happen to the commonwealth as to the serpent in the fable, whose tail, rising in rebellion against the head, complained as of great grievance that it was always forced to follow, and required that it should be permitted by turns to lead the way, and as taking the command accordingly, it soon afflicted by its senseless courses mischiefs in abundance upon itself, while the head was torn and lacerated with following, contrary to nature, a guide that was deaf and blind. And such we see to have been the lot of many, who, submitting to be guided by the inclinations of an uninformed and unreasoning multitude, could neither stop nor recover themselves out of the confusion. This is what has occurred to us to say of that glory which depends on the voices of large numbers, considering the sad effects of it in the misfortunes of Caius and Tiberius Gracchus, men of noble nature, and whose generous natural dispositions were improved by the best of educations, and who came to the administration of affairs with the most laudable intentions. Yet they were ruined, I cannot say by an immoderate desire of glory, but by a more excusable fear of disgrace. For, being excessively beloved and favored by the people, they thought it a discredit to them not to make full repayment, endeavoring by new public acts to outdo the honors they had received, and again, because of these new kindnesses, incurring yet further distinctions, till the people and they, mutually inflamed, and vying thus with each other in honors and benefits, brought things at last to such a pass that they might say that to engage so far was indeed a folly, but to retreat would now be a shame. This the reader will easily gather from the story. I will now compare with them two Lacedaemonian popular leaders, the kings Agis and Cleomenes, for they being desirous also to raise the people, and to restore the noble and just form of government, now long fallen into disuse, incurred the hatred of the rich and powerful, who could not endure to be deprived of the selfish enjoyment to which they were accustomed. These were not brotherly. These were not indeed brothers by nature, as the two Romans, but they had a kind of brotherly resemblance in their actions and designs, which took a rise from such beginnings and occasions as I am now able to relate. When the love of gold and silver had once gained admittance into the Lacedaemonian commonwealth, it was quickly followed by avarice and baseness of spirit in the pursuit of it, and by luxury, effeminacy, and prodigality in the use. Then Sparta fell from almost all her former virtue and repute, and so continued till the days of Agis and Leonidas, who both together were kings of the Lacedaemonians. Agis was of the royal family of Europon, son of Eudamidas, and the sixth in descent from Agesilaus, who made the expedition into Asia, and was the greatest man of his time in Greece. Agesilaus left behind him a son called Archidamus, the same who was slain at Mandonium in Italy by the Asapians, and who was then succeeded by his eldest son Agis, he being killed by Antipater near Megalopolis, and, leaving no issue, was succeeded by his brother Eudamidas, he by a son called Archidamus, and Archidamus by another Eudamidas, the father of this Agis, of whom we now treat. Leonidas, son of Cleomenes, was of the other royal house of Agiada, and the eighth in descent from Pausanias, who defeated Mardonius in the battle of Plataea. Pausanias was succeeded by a son called Pleistoanax, and he by another Pausanias, who was banished and lived as a private man at Tegea, while his eldest son Agesipolis reigned in his palace. He, dying without issue, was succeeded by a younger brother called Cleombrotus, who left two sons. The elder was Agesipolis, who reigned but a short time and died without issue. The younger, who then became the king, was called Cleomenes and had two sons, Acrotatus and Cleonomus. The first died before his father, but left a son called Agis, who succeeded, and being slain at Corinth, left the kingdom to his son Acrotatus. This Acrotatus was defeated and slain near Megalopolis in a battle against the tyrant Aristodemus. He left his wife, big with child, in honor of being delivered of a son. Leonidas, son of the above-named Cleonomus, was made his guardian, and as the young king died before becoming a man, he succeeded in the kingdom. Leonidas was a king not particularly suitable to his people, for though there were at the time at Sparta a general decline in manners, yet a greater revolt from the old habits appeared in him than in others, for having lived a long time among the great lords of Persia, and been a follower of King Seleucus, he unadvisedly thought to imitate among Greek institutions, and in a lawful government, the pride and assumption usual in those courts. Agis, on the contrary, in fineness of nature and elevation of mind, not only far exceeded Leonidas, but in a manner all the kings that have reigned since the great Agesilaus, for though he had been bred very tenderly in abundance and even in luxury by his mother Agesistrata and his grandmother Archidamia, who were the wealthiest of the Achaemenians, yet before the age of 20 he renounced all the indulgence and pleasures. Well, pleasures for themselves might be a good idea, but not to that extent. Withdrawing himself as far as possible from the gaiety and ornament which seemed becoming to the grace of his person, he made it his pride to appear in the coarse Spartan coat. In his meals, his bathings, and in all his exercises, he followed the old Laconian usage, and was often heard to say he had no desire for the place of a king if he did not hope by means of that authority to restore their ancient laws and discipline. The Lacedaemonians might date the beginning of their corruption from their conquest of Athens, and the influx of gold and silver among them that thence ensued. Yet, nevertheless, the number of houses which Lycurgus appointed, being still maintained, and the law remaining in force, by which every one was obliged to leave his lot or portion of land entirely to his son, a kind of order and equality was thereby preserved, which still in some degree sustained the state amidst its errors in other respects. But one Epictetus, happening to be aphore a man of great influence and of a wilful violent spirit, on some occasion of a quarrel with his son proposed a decree that all men should have liberty to dispose of their land by gift in their lifetime, or by their last will and testament, this being promoted by him to satisfy a passion of revenge, and through covetousness consented to by others, and thus enacted for law, was the ruin of the best state of the commonwealth, for the rich men, without scruple, drew the estate into their own hands, excluding the rightful heirs from their succession, and all the wealth being centered upon the few, the generality were poor and miserable. Honorable pursuits, for which there was no longer leisure, were neglected. The state was filled with sordid business, and with hatred and envy of the rich. Well, there's obviously problems on both ends tend to be the case, but if the rich weren't using their wealth right anyways, it's probably better to be poor and have less responsibility to do something valuable. There did not remain above 700 of the old Spartan families, of which perhaps 100 might have estate in the land, and the rest were destitute alike of wealth and of honor, were tardy and unperforming in defense of their country against its enemies abroad, and eagerly watch the opportunity for change and revolution at home. Agis, therefore, believing it a glorious action, as in truth it was, to equalize and repeople the state, began to sound the inclinations of the citizens. He found the young men disposed beyond his expectation. They were eager to enter with him upon the contest in the case of virtue, and to fling aside for freedom's sake their old manner of life as readily as the wrestler does his garment. But the old men, habituated and more confirmed in their vices, were most of them as alarmed at the very name of Lycurgus as a fugitive slave, to be brought back before his offended master. These men could not endure to hear Agis continually deploring the present state of Sparta, and wishing she might be restored to her ancient glory. But on the other side, Lysander, the son of Libas, Mandroclidas, the son of Ecphanus, together with Agesilaus, not only improved his design, but assisted and confirmed him in it. Lysander had a great authority and credit with the people. Mandroclidas was esteemed the ablest Greek of his time to manage an affair and put it in train, and joined with skill and cunning had a great degree of boldness. Agesilaus was the king's uncle by the mother's side, an eloquent man, but covetous and voluptuous, who was not moved by considerations of public good, but rather seemed to be persuaded in it by his son Hippomedon, whose courage and signal actions in war had gained him a high esteem and great influence among the young men of Sparta, though indeed the true motive was that he had many debts, and hoped by this means to be freed from them. As soon as Agis had prevailed with his uncle, and endeavored by his mediation to gain his mother also, who had many friends and followers, and a number of persons in her debt in the city, and took a considerable part in public affairs. At the first proposal she was very averse, and strongly advised her son not to engage in so difficult and unprofitable an enterprise. But Agesilaus endeavored to possess her that the thing was not so difficult as she imagined, that it might in all likelihood redound